I'll start out with a quick question. Does anybody in here actually own an electric vehicle right now? Can you raise your hand? So we have one, two, three. Okay, that's four. It's a few more than I was expecting. Um, who here wants to get an electric vehicle in the next 5 years? Everybody's hand should be raised right now. They're really cool. So if your hand's not raised right now, you're wrong. Thank you, Veronica. So my name's Carter Boyle, and I'm a utility investment planner with 1898 & Co. And to oversimplify my job, I help utilities figure out how to spend their money. And as an electrical engineer, I specialize with electric utilities and electric vehicles. And I started out on this journey about 6 years ago when I went to be an electrical engineer in the automotive industry. I wasn't in the infrastructure business because I wanted to figure out how to get as many electric vehicles on the road as possible. So I spent a while in Germany doing R&D for a large German auto manufacturer. But then one day it dawned on me that it wasn't the technology that was the reason why people weren't buying electric vehicles. The real hurdle to that is having a place to charge it. So I came back to the US and I started working for an infrastructure company, Burns & McDonnell. They own 1898 & Co. And we are the strategy consulting arm of Burns & McDonnell. And for the past 3 years, I've been working on studies on the infrastructure and power grid side to figure out how to charge electric vehicles. Right now, we'll look at a quick video for a possible future of what might happen with that. Should play soon. Spoiler alert, video didn't play, but there was a transformer fire in Philadelphia, 4,000 customers out, and that's because the infrastructure was old and over capacity. When transformers are over capacity, they heat up, and these assets are out on the grid for 40 years at a minimum. There's a lot of them out there in the US for over 50 and even 60 years old. So what happens when you add more load on them than they were expected to? They overheat and they explode. They burst into flames, or it can be a bit quieter. The point is, there's a blackout. Whenever there's a blackout and I wake up in one, I always look over at my alarm clock and I'm like, why isn't that working? Well, at this point I'm late, so I rush out of bed and I go on to turn on a light switch. And every single time, I have to flick it on and off 3 times before I figure out that the power's out. Regardless of the fact that I work in the power industry, I take power for granted every single day that I have it. I expect it to be there. And that's evident whenever we have a blackout. So why does this happen? Let's look at the impacts to electric vehicles on substations. If you don't know what a substation is, it's an important infrastructure tool to deliver power to our homes. Everywhere gets power from a substation, and this color coding shows a few different kinds of substations and the impacts of electric vehicles on them. Now, the most common substation is a 15 kilovolt substation in the Southeast. The exact numbers will change for you utility people out here who know that there is not a 15 kilovolt substation. Bear with me. And typically you have between 9,000 and 12,000 customers on one. Well, if you add 20% electric vehicles on that, you get into the red. Well, red means it's kaput, it's broken, it does not work. Yellow, you're overloaded a large portion of the year and you're going to have decreased lifetime on those assets. It needs to be replaced soon. So the question becomes, how do we get it into the green? We get it into the green by either by having substations with fewer customers. That requires that we build more substations. The other way we do it is rebuild our current ones, but stronger. So where space is limited, we might need to have a higher voltage in order to support that amount of load. There are some challenges with that. The first one is real estate. We have some clients in New Mexico who run a municipality with 3 substations. And every single time, and they've been needing a new substation for the past 8 years, but every city council meeting they go to, every public meeting they hold advertising the substation, none of the people in the community want a substation. They're ugly. We don't need it. Why doesn't the infrastructure work right now? Well, now that it's been 8 years, it's kind of hard to take one of those vital substations out of line, and it's going to be run until failure before somebody can actually get in there and rebuild this infrastructure. The second problem is a question of social justice. So if the people who have the time to go to city council meetings and protest against this new substation in their area, where does that substation go? And the answer is in the areas where people don't have the time or the money or the resources or even knowledge to protest against that. And it isn't these people who are lacking the resources who are getting the benefits of it either. They don't own the businesses that will benefit from electrification. They don't have the capital to buy an electric vehicle at this point. The third item is a question of beauty. Now, I'm an electrical engineer. I think that substations are beautiful, but most of you might not. Most people consider them a bit of an eyesore. And you can beautify them, you can put big walls around them, and you can even put them inside of a building, but that adds unnecessary cost to it, and if you put it inside of a building, that can actually double the cost of the substation, because you have to have new technical guidelines to go about that. And when we're looking to rebuild one of these things, you're already in the millions of dollars and you want to double those costs. Most people don't want their power rates to go up that much because at the end of the day, we have to pay for that power. Moving on to some critical substation components like transformers and switchgear. When 2 years ago, back in 2020, when I was putting investment plans together for a new power transformer, anywhere between 1 and 1.2 million would have been a good guess. Now, if I put that on a sheet in a spreadsheet to a client, they would laugh at me. They would say, that's at least $2 million. And we'd be lucky with that. Last time I talked to a supplier for a power transformer, they could not give a guaranteed lead time. They said, we will call you when the transformer is ready, and then it depends on the supply chain for the number of weeks to get there. So we have no clue how long it will take for those critical substation components to get here. And although there is a lot more American manufacturing in the bill that have recently passed, we do not have the type of steel necessary to create substation transformers in this country, not even on this continent. The entire continent of North America, substation steel is not there. We have a lot of steel here, and it just takes a little bit of retooling to create that, but nobody's undertaken that. The last item on costs is everybody's trying to rebuild their system at the same time. Everybody wants to buy the transformers, and that exacerbates the first 2 problems. It adds costs and it adds lead time. So let's look at a different kind of transformer, the service transformer, specifically the residential ones. These are the cans and the green boxes outside of your house. And they have specific ratings, and utilities have a rule of thumb on how they size that. On the spreadsheets that I have of about 20,000 circuits, most utilities use around 13.75 kVA per customer, which means that you get anywhere from 15 kVA to 25 kVA that are the most common, and there are about 4 million of those devices in the continental United States. Each one of those, whenever it fails unexpectedly, can cost about $35,000 to replace, with operational costs and costs to the consumer. If you replace that ahead of time, the cost is a third. But if I could predict the future on when these would fail, I would not be up here giving this talk right now. I would be living in a beach. So all of those that are the most common in the Southeast are also red and yellow, which means we have to start allocating more transformer capacity for the customers. Now, why do I think this is going to be an ongoing problem in the future? Keep in mind, these numbers are with 20% electric vehicles. That's because electric vehicle adoption is coming along exponentially. By 2030, there's going to be 10% of the vehicles in this country that are electric or plug-in hybrid. So I just said all of my results were for 20%, and now we're showing that it's 10%. So this problem's probably pretty far away. Well, I wish that all of those electric vehicles just spread themselves uniformly across the country like they do in my spreadsheets, but they don't do that. They like to concentrate themselves in specific neighborhoods and with different groups of houses. So as soon as Bob down the street gets an electric vehicle, I want an electric vehicle because I want to be cool like Bob. Just the way things go. There are also a couple of other drivers that are doing this, and I think these forecasts are actually a little low considering recent events. But we've had very high gas prices recently, and they've come down a little bit, but we've seen that they can get high, and there's no reason why they couldn't remain high for longer periods of time. Second one would be the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, last time I analyzed it, there was about $35 billion in electric vehicle manufacturing and programs that went into that program. There was also a lot of money that went into solar. But let's get a show of hands. Who thinks that, I want to ask about the amount of money that goes into the transmission and distribution infrastructure to feed these items. Who thinks that the bill contained more than $1 billion? Nobody? Y'all are smart. Had no money that went into the transmission and distribution infrastructure. It's all on programs and stressors on that infrastructure, so that's going to be even more taxed. Another item which increases the propensity of electric vehicles to come is the number of vehicles available. So in the next 4 years, we have 53 new named model vehicles. Now, 5 years ago, I could only tell you that it was Tesla, but now it's every car company. So this year, we've got the luxury brands, the Cadillac Lyriq and the EQ. Now, the F-150 Lightning isn't actually a luxury brand, but there is so much demand for the F-150 Lightning that they are not building the bottom 3 trim levels, and the average MSRP price for that is $82,000. Way more expensive than your Tesla Model 3. In 2023, we start getting the people's brands. Volkswagen. I told you I lived in Germany for a while. It means the people's car. They're going to be cheaper and more accessible to most people. And when people can buy it, it's cool to say that you drive an EV. It's environmentally responsible. That's awesome that people will have more access to it. In 2024, another truck, we have Ram. Trucks are the best-selling vehicles in this country. Once you start selling trucks, then everybody starts getting one. Same thing with Honda with the Ridgeline. And then Stellantis, they own Dodge Ram, and then GM. GM hasn't named the models that are going to be all electric, but they want over 30 all-electric models. And they did a complete rebranding to go around this electric and connected future. And that tells you that they're coming and they're ready for it and they're ready to make some money. Rivian. This is a Southeast conference. We're going to have that in Georgia, a brand new multi-billion-dollar plant that's just an hour away in Covington. You're telling me every single one of those engineers is not going to drive an electric truck? You're telling me all the farmers in that area aren't going to want to get one of these trucks that are being built right next to them? I think they will. So the question becomes, what can we do about it? I don't want this to be doom and gloom today, but we're in a tough situation. And there's a couple of things we can do. The first one I want to urge you to do is, if you're in the development space, if you operate a fleet, is contact your utility about it. Let them know your plans. Let them know when you're thinking about doing it. The sooner that they have heads up, the better that they can plan. And that helps all of us. It helps them think about how they're going to replace their infrastructure, and the more time you have to do that, the cheaper it can be. You can even bulk batch these projects so that the overhead is lower. We don't have to do them ad hoc as needed. Second one is proactive investment. If you're at a utility or if you're a utility planner, be rethinking your capital plans and your standards. As your equipment ages today and you replace it, how can you be smarter about that? How can you find the oldest parts of your system and replace them in a wide breadth rather than going to the items that break all the time? You unlock more efficiencies that way. And then finally, everybody here is an electricity ratepayer. If your utility has a demand response program, please go sign up for that. At very little cost to you, and even sometimes they will pay you. You can reduce the amount of demand that electric vehicles are going to bring on the electric system at the critical times when it's going to be causing transformers to explode. We have a client in the Midwest who, 2 summers ago, they had problems with transformers spontaneously combusting into flames across their territory pretty randomly. It was due to the overheating issue I was talking about earlier. And they were in the middle of implementing a demand response program. They said, well, let's see if that tried it. This summer, they didn't have any transformers overheat. Now, that was an awesome success story, but I'm still not sure if all of the transformers that were going to overheat and explode just didn't do it last summer. We can't prove that yet, but so far it looks like good news. So that's all I have for today. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
What parts of the country are you seeing a real proactive response from the local utilities for accommodating electric vehicles?
So the Midwest, the areas around Detroit, because they know that it's coming. It is not a theory. They know that it's coming now. They've been communicated with the automotive manufacturers, and they've already seen that load on their system. We actually have a client who is trying to find quotes to put together a 20-year program that would allow them to completely rebuild their system to a new spec and focusing the toughest areas first and moving on down through their system.
And how quickly are you seeing utilities convert from greenhouse gas producing? I mean, the whole promise of this, I thought, was that eventually, this electric power would be produced in a carbon neutral environment. How fast are utilities also planning to convert to clean energy?
They're trying to do it as quickly as possible while still giving us power. So there's a hierarchy of needs here. Number one is that you have power when you go to turn on your light switch. And then number two is that it is clean. So having power comes first. Beck? Oh, that's a good question. For going back into the 90s, we've been talking about electric vehicles for a long time, and nobody could have said that this decade was going to be the one when electric vehicles actually finally come. That's my thought about it. I'm saying we didn't know. It could have been earlier than this, but it's just being put off for so long that it becomes a question of, well, is this actually going to come or not? And now we have the indicators to say, yes, it's coming now. Marty?
So what role will residential solar play in helping alleviate this problem, if at all?
So it doesn't help because the peak is between 6 and 8 p.m. and the sun doesn't shine a lot at night. Now, residential solar plus batteries could help, but we are putting all of these lithium-ion batteries in these vehicles already. So where are we going to get the batteries to put them in our houses as well, is my question. That's a good one. Batteries are super important. If I could put batteries everywhere, it would honestly fix most of the problems we have. So that's everything. Thank you so much. I'll be outside if you'd like to talk more.